The stars were cold and endless above the Imperial observation deck of Zelther Prime, but inside, the air hummed with tension. High Marshal Drex Veruin stood rigid, his eyes locked on the translucent holoscreen casting a shifting display of gravitational anomalies across the void. He had commanded battles across 3 spiral arms and stared down singularities, but what he saw now frayed the edges of even his war-tempered nerves. "It hasn't changed course," said Syra Kell, the Empire's chief xenocartographer. Her voice was low but unsteady. "It's moving with intent." The object, no ship, was coming from a sector once believed sterile, void of anything save dust and dead stars. But it moved with too much precision to be natural. Sleek, massive, unmapped. Its energy emissions were unlike anything in the Imperial Codex. Drex turned to the others gathered in the briefing chamber. There were only 5 of them. Too few for something this monumental, but the Emperor's order had been absolute. No public council, no panic. "What are we looking at?" Drex asked. No one answered immediately. The silence wasn't ignorance, it was disbelief. Then, from the far end of the table, Chancellor Idrex leaned forward. His skin, a lattice of emerald and obsidian scales, glinted under the chamber lights. "I believe," he began carefully, "that we're seeing a Terran vessel." The room chilled. "Humans?" Syra's voice cracked with incredulity. "They're extinct. Lost in their own collapse. Primitive." Idrex's forked tongue flicked once before retreating. That was the consensus. But this architecture, it matches ancient Terran schematics from the Ganymede archives. A prototype rumored before their disappearance. Project Nemesis. Drex narrowed his eyes. He hated legends. Legends bred false hope, or worse, unprepared wars. "How certain are you?" 92% match in hull geometry. Energy core traces to dark fusion, an impossibility until now. "Or so we thought." There was a pause. Outside, the stars spun on in silence, oblivious to the storm forming beneath them. "If this is a human warship," Drex said slowly, "why reveal itself now?" Syra spoke before the others could. "Maybe they never left. Maybe we just stopped looking." That thought clung to the chamber's oxygen like a toxin. The galaxy had written off Earth centuries ago. Their own war had consumed them, their systems burned or frozen in rebellion. And then silence. No transmissions. No travel. Just decay. And now this. "Bring in the visual," Drex ordered. The lights dimmed. The holoscreen flared with color, and there it was. The vessel floated against the black, enormous beyond comprehension. Wings of sleek alloy arched outward like predatory fins. The hull shimmered with blue-gray plating, scored with radiant veins of orange, pulsing like arteries. At its core, a singular red eye glowed, focused, unblinking. It did not drift like a derelict. It prowled. Syra leaned forward. "It's beautiful." "It's a threat," Drex said coldly. "We don't know that," she countered. "We don't have the luxury of optimism." Idrex exhaled slowly. "Even if it is human, the Empire cannot be seen as unprepared. We must act." "And say what?" Drex growled. "That a ghost from a dead planet is on our doorstep? That we've lied to our people for centuries about the strength of our borders? Better than lying to ourselves now." The warship, designated only as Unregistered Object Zeta-9, continued its silent approach. No hails answered. No patterns matched. It seemed to ignore every attempt at communication as if the Empire's language was beneath acknowledgement. Drex hated being ignored. "What's our timeline?" he asked. 5 days before it reaches inhabited space," Syra replied. "Too fast," Drex muttered. "Far too fast." Idrex stood, his motion slow but deliberate. "We'll convene the inner cabinet tonight. Prepare military contingencies." "But, Marshal..." Drex raised an eyebrow. "If this is a vanguard," Idrex continued, "you must understand something. The Empire has never faced the humans. Not truly. If this ship is any indication, They didn't just survive. They evolved. A chill spidered down Drex's spine. No one spoke as the display zoomed closer. The warship's surface rippled with shifting armor plates, adjusting in real time. There were no visible crew ports, no signs of biology. It was either unmanned or its occupants had embraced a level of cybernetic integration the Empire had deemed theoretical. It wasn't just a warship. It was a message, and the message was clear. Humanity had returned, not as victims, not as supplicants, but as something reborn and unrecognizable. The screen flickered. For a moment, barely a second, a symbol appeared on the ship's prow. A stylized, ancient character. A single word in dead Terran script. Reclaim. Then it vanished. Drex stood unmoving for a long moment, jaw clenched. The others waited for him to speak. Alert all outer fleets, he said at last. Code Black. No public transmissions. Tell the Emperor we may be out of time. Outside, Zeta 9 glided through the void with the inevitability of a falling star. And it was heading straight for them. The chamber deep beneath the Imperial Archive was older than the Empire itself, carved into the mantle of Zelther Prime when its skies were still wild. It smelled of ionized dust and forgotten truth. Syra Kell's boots echoed across the obsidian floor as she followed Archivist Relvan into the restricted tier. No maps guided them here, only oral permission and blood clearance. This is where we keep what history denies, Relvan said, his voice low and unhurried. And what power forgets. Syra said nothing. Her mind was still caught on the word etched onto the warship's prow, reclaim. It wasn't a threat, it was a declaration. Relvan stopped before a sealed vault rimmed in kinetic stasis field. He pressed a thumb to the panel. A hiss answered. The Ganymede files, he murmured. Classified since Cycle 2. Inside, rows of data rods shimmered like ghostlights. Syra reached for the one Relvan indicated. No label, no index, and slotted it into her holopad. Instantly, fragments of ancient Terran schematics burst into view. The architecture matched the warship outside. More than matched, it was identical. Project Nemesis, she whispered. So it was real. Relvan nodded. A last-ditch program initiated before their fall. A fleet of autonomous dreadnoughts. Weapons of extinction. Self-aware, fully mobile, impossible to track once launched. But no records of deployment. Because the Empire buried them, Relvan said. Along with everything else related to Terran development after the fall. They were afraid. Syra looked up. Of what? Of what comes next? High Marshal Drex stood before the inner cabinet, the weight of 1,000 systems pressing against his spine. The chamber, once a theater for ceremony, had become a bunker of sharp words and sharpened agendas. Every counselor present carried a legacy of conquest, none prepared to face something they didn't understand. The ship is accelerating, Drex said without preamble. It will reach Sector 17 within 72 hours. The cabinet buzzed with hushed voices. Chancellor Idrex remained still, his lidded eyes on Drex. We've attempted every communication protocol, Drex continued. No response. Our drones cannot penetrate its defenses. Proximity triggers magnetic distortions. It's like the void bends to accommodate it. Then it is human, said Valus Kor, the Minister of Defense. Or something worse. They were primitives, snapped a merchant delegate. Barely out of their own system before they imploded. Drex's voice was quiet, but final. And yet here they are. Idrex spoke at last. We must consider the possibility that they didn't implode. That what we perceived as collapse was metamorphosis. Kor scoffed. Into this? No species evolves this fast. Syra stepped forward, earning raised eyebrows. Scientists weren't typically granted audience in this chamber. Drex motioned for silence. I've seen the archives, she said. Terrans were unpredictable, but not primitive. They achieved AI integration centuries ahead of anyone else. Their philosophies embraced chaos, Adaptation through pressure. They didn't build to last. They built to survive. There's a difference. Survival doesn't explain that ship, Idrex said. That's not survival. That's vengeance. No one denied it. The ship's design was not utilitarian. It was theatrical, intimidating, intentional, built not just to fight, but to terrify. What's our position? Kor asked. Engage or observe? Drex glanced at Syra, then back to the room. We observe. For now. But if it enters inhabited space, we cannot guarantee restraint. Idrex nodded grimly. Then let us hope it doesn't. Across the void, in the depths of the communications relay orbiting the outpost world of Ulrentau, technician Rallo Vin watched his screen blur into static. He tapped the console. Nothing responded. Then, without warning, a signal broke through. Not a message. A pattern. Frequencies danced in layered harmonics, too fast for native processing. Rallo called for the AI interpreter. The machine ran for 4 minutes, then stopped. Only one phrase emerged from the tangle of encoded rhythms. Not forgotten. His hands trembled. Back on Zelther Prime, Drex read the decoded message in silence. No demand. No introduction. Just that chilling certainty. Idrex entered the command center. It's a prelude. To what? Drex asked, though he already suspected. To a return, Idrex answered. They're not announcing war. They're announcing presence. Drex turned back to the star map. The warship, Zeta-9, continued its deliberate course. No deviation. No acceleration. But its path had altered slightly. It was no longer skimming the edge of the Empire's sphere. It was entering it. We need to prepare for the worst, he said. Syra's voice cut through the silence behind them. Or prepare for the truth. Both men turned. She held up a new projection. The warship's data signature, its core, wasn't just alien to Imperial technology. It was incompatible with known physics, at least as they understood it. It's not just advanced, she said. It's post-science. They're using principles we haven't even imagined. That ship is a generation ahead. Maybe more. Drex stared at the display. For the first time in his career, he wasn't looking at a target. He was looking at an heir. Or an omen. And he had no idea which. Dispatch the scout fleets, he said. Not to intercept. To witness. The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was dread. They had waited too long. Believed too little. And now, the Terrans were coming home. The scout vessel Virex 1 drifted just outside the boundary line of restricted space, its hull cloaked in a mirrored haze that shimmered like liquid glass. Captain Lyranask had seen her share of anomalies in the Empire's service, void serpents, time fractures, even the uncharted silence of a dead binary, but nothing like this. The Terran warship filled the viewport with quiet menace. It did not move with urgency. It glided with purpose. Like it knew there was no rush, like it had waited centuries for this exact moment. Lyra leaned forward, scrutinizing the faint lattice of glowing orange conduits along its underbelly. They pulsed like breath timed alive. No weapon ports. No shield flares. Not even an escort, her navigator murmured. It's just cruising. Ships like that don't need escorts, Lyra replied. They are the threat. A long pause followed. Then, without command, the Terran vessel turned slightly, just a tilt of its vast body, a change in orientation. Its central eye, that terrible red core, focused on Virex 1. Did it scan us? The comms officer whispered. I don't think it has to, Lyra said. Back on Zelther Prime, the command feeds lit up. Multiple observation drones caught the same moment. The Terran warship acknowledging Virex 1's presence, not with weapons but with attention. They know we're watching, Syra said to Drex, her voice brittle. And they're choosing not to act. That's calculated. Drex grunted. Or merciful. But mercy was not what he expected from a species that had vanished behind a wall of fire and entropy. What if it's a test? Syra asked. A controlled approach to gauge our reaction? To see how we behave under pressure. Then we've already failed, Drex said, nodding to the growing list of skirmishes erupting across the rim sectors. Local commanders, unaware of the silence mandate, had launched preemptive strikes on smaller anomalies. Rogue satellites, drifting signals, even shadows. Panic had cracked the surface. In the Imperial Citadel, Chancellor Idrex stood before the Emperor, who sat swathed in shadows and light, his presence more myth than man. They are not issuing demands, Idrex said. They are not speaking at all. Which is the most alarming tactic of all. The Emperor's voice was slow, carved from stone. What does silence mean in a language we do not know? It means superiority, Idrex answered. Or disdain. Silence stretched. The Emperor moved at last, barely a gesture. Send an envoy. One ship. No weapons. No guards. And one message: we recognize your return. Marshal Veruin will protest, Idrex said. He serves. He does not decide. When the order reached Drex, his jaw clenched so tight he felt his back teeth grind. We are offering weakness. No, Cyrus said, stepping beside him. We're offering acknowledgement. He looked at her, this scientist who had spoken more truth in whispers than his generals had in years. You'll go? He asked. She nodded. I've studied them longer than anyone, and I'm the only one not afraid of what they've become. Drex didn't argue. He knew when someone had already made peace with danger. The envoy ship Veritas was a sleek diplomatic model, unarmed, white-bodied, lined with passive light beacons. It departed Zelther Prime in silence, carrying only Syra and a single diplomatic AI. The journey took less than a day. The Terran warship did not alter course, but neither did it retreat. As Veritas approached, its engines dimmed as if in anticipation. Syra stood before the viewport as the vessel loomed into full clarity. It was no longer beautiful. It was sublime. The kind of presence that transcended understanding. This is Syra Kell of the Galactic Empire, she transmitted, voice steady. We come in peace. We recognize your return. There was no response. Seconds turned into minutes. The AI pulsed gently beside her, recording everything. Then, without warning, a pulse rippled from the warship. A communication burst across multiple frequencies, encoded in a language no known algorithm could translate. Syra stared at the screen as it unfolded. Glyphs and geometries like the mathematics of gods. The AI tried to parse the symbols, then froze. It restarted without command, systems overwhelmed. A second signal followed. Simpler. Audible. A single voice, modulated but unmistakably human. This territory was abandoned. Now it is reclaimed. Stand aside. Syra's breath hitched. Reclaimed by whom? She asked. The reply came instantly. By the children of Earth. We are what remains. We are what returns. Her heart raced. This was no revival. This was a reckoning. Why now? She asked. Because the stars are ours again. The Terran vessel began to move, not to attack, but to pass. It curved gently around Veritas, its vast form casting shadows that drowned the stars. Syra watched it fade into the black, destination still unknown. She turned to the AI, which now displayed a final message in decrypted script. This was not the first. Others come. She sat down, for the first time in hours, and closed her eyes. The Empire had awakened something ancient, and now it was no longer the only power in the galaxy. The second ship emerged from the darkness 6 days later. It didn't announce itself, didn't mimic the deliberate trajectory of the first. It simply appeared, phasing into real space above the gas giant LYX-9, destabilizing every satellite and orbital outpost with a gravity wake that shorted sensor arrays across 3 systems. This one was different, smaller than the original Terran warship, but sleeker, sharper. It pulsed with a blue-tinged luminescence that seemed to whisper through vacuum. In the command chamber of Zelther Prime, Drex Veruin stood rigid as the images resolved. We assumed the first was symbolic, he said, his voice clipped. A lone survivor, a messenger. But now, this is formation. More than that, Syra Kell answered beside him, her face lit by the flickering holographs. This one's listening. The newcomer warship, designated Theta 3, had responded to Imperial observation probes with pulses of harmonic sound, structured, rhythmic, laced with familiar Terran intervals. A call-and-response pattern. It was, in Syra's words, music as communication, a throwback to how early human scientists had once attempted to greet the cosmos. They're not just reclaiming space, she said. They're re-establishing culture, identity, memory. Drex didn't like the word reclaiming. It implied possession, and possession demanded ownership. Across the Empire, dissent festered. Sectors began reinforcing borders, stationing fleets where none had been needed in decades. Rumors spread faster than data. Some claimed entire mining colonies had gone dark after unexpected Terran contact. Others whispered of artificial storms, of systems subtly realigning under an invisible hand. We're losing control, Chancellor Idrex said flatly during the emergency assembly. Not through violence, through perception. They haven't fired a shot, Minister Kor spat. And yet our people are preparing for war. Because they know what we taught them, Idrex replied. That peace is weakness. And now, something stronger has arrived. The Emperor, once again seated in silence, raised a hand. The room hushed. You said they are claiming, he said slowly. Then let them claim. But we will choose what is yielded. It was not an order to attack. It was a strategy of resistance through negotiation. Flex where needed, defend what could not be conceded. To Syra, it felt like an invitation to disaster. She watched Theta 3 from the orbital observatory, alone. Unlike Zeta 9, the first ship, this one lingered near Imperial space but made no effort to cross boundaries. It was waiting for something. She opened a direct transmission. This is Syra Kell, envoy of the Galactic Empire. I request dialogue. Not surrender. Not challenge. Just understanding. For a moment, nothing. Then a flicker of static cut through her comms. A voice responded. Clear. Measured. Male. Your empire lasted long. Long enough to forget. What did we forget? She asked. What it means to be small. The reply stunned her. She'd expected bravado, a litany of historical grievances. Not this. I don't speak for the whole empire, she said. But I believe we want to avoid conflict. Conflict is not avoided, the voice said. It is deferred. Until one side forgets fear. A pause. Then softer. You remember now. Syra leaned forward. Then what happens next? Now we observe. We weigh. We choose. The transmission ended. Later that night, Drex visited the observatory. Syra stood watching the stars as Theta 3 began a slow, deliberate shift in position. Not random. Strategic. They're testing our defenses, Drex said. No, she replied. They're testing our response. He didn't argue. He could feel the truth of it in his bones. There will be more, she said. They didn't come to destroy us. They came to see what's left. Drex folded his arms. And if they don't like what they see? Syra's answer came after a long silence. Then we won't be remembered at all. As Theta 3 disappeared beyond the fringe of planetary orbit, a third signal came through, untraceable in origin, deeply encoded, but unmistakably human. It was just 3 words. The cradle stirs. The implications were immense. Earth was no longer forgotten. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of sensors and star maps, the heart of humanity, the one the Empire had assumed long dead, was awakening.